The man charged with attacking two teenage sisters at Grand Central Terminal. This as they were visiting New York City.
This week I was delivering a training session near Grand Central Station, right in the heart of Manhattan. And the topic was situational awareness, a topic I talk about often. But being that close to one of the busiest transportation hubs in the world, with its constant flow of people, noise, and energy, made me think about a true crime case that actually happened right there. It's a reminder that awareness isn't just theory, it's survival. New York City has always been a study in contrast. On one hand, it's a city of dreams, opportunity, and relentless ambition. On the other, it's unpredictable, raw, restless, and sometimes dangerous. The streets have their rhythm, but underneath that rhythm, there's a pulse that demands attention. You can feel it in Times Square. It echoes off the buildings in Manhattan, seen in the faces of millions who come here chasing art, culture, fame, or just a sense of belonging. If you ever walk through the city, you know what I mean. The sounds hit you first. The horns, the sirens, the chatter of a dozen languages all at once. Then the smells, roasted peanuts, exhaust from a city bus, maybe a slice of pizza fresh out of the oven. It is a full sensory experience, all happening in motion. But what most people miss, because they're caught up in this motion, are the sudden cues that something is off. That's why I teach reading the environment, recognizing disruptions, understanding what doesn't fit. Now, I've spent decades in law enforcement and security, and one thing that I've learned is that crime is just as much of New York's DNA as the architecture. You can't separate the two. The city has had its share of violence, some infamous, some forgotten, but each incident tells a story about human behavior, awareness, and opportunity. In a place this dense, anonymity is a weapon. People move shoulder to shoulder, yet most don't make eye contact. Everyone is in their own world, earbuds, heads down, screens up, and that's exactly what offenders look for. Distraction, isolation, vulnerability. In plain sight, you're a target. But amid all that chaos, is beauty real, breathtaking beauty. Walk a few blocks and you'll find world-class art museums, Broadway theaters, historic churches tucked between the skyscrapers, and architecture that tells a story of a century. New York City is alive in a way that no other city is. It revives itself every other decade, but yet somehow remains the same. The city never stops moving, and somehow that's part of its charm and danger. That brings me to Grand Central Station. If you've never been there, it's not just a train terminal. It's a living monument. Every time I walk through it, I think about what it represents. Movement, ambition, connection. It's where millions of lives intersect every week. Commuters rush every week to catch trains, tourists staring up at the constellations painted on the ceiling, street musicians filling the space with echoes of jazz or violin. There's an energy there that's almost electric. But it's also a crossroads for everyone, the distracted, the lost, and sometimes the dangerous. Beneath the grandeur and history, Grand Central has seen its share of crimes, from pickpockets to assaults, to con artists, to predators. There's a hidden layer that most people never notice. You could be standing in one of the most beautiful public spaces in the country and not realize how quickly beauty can turn to chaos. Now, Grand Central Station wasn't always this polished. It opened in 1913, back when New York City was transforming into a modern metropolis. The architecture was revolutionary for its time. Arches, marble floors, celestial ceiling. It was built to impress, to symbolize progress. And boy, does it impress. But over decades, the station saw everything from soldiers departing for war to decay in the 1970s, when this building nearly fell into ruins. And now it is beautiful. An illustration of modern efficiency. And yet, despite all that progress, crime still finds its way in. The thing like public spaces, like Grand Central Station, is that they equalizes from millionaires to the homeless, from diplomats to kids on their first trip to New York. That mix makes it dynamic, but also unpredictable. And unpredictability is where danger hides. As I was walking through the concourse this week, I looked around at the people, hundreds, rushing in every direction, and I thought about an incident that happened not long ago, right here. A violent, senseless attack that involved two teenagers visiting from another country. It was a tragedy that could have been avoided and should have been avoided. A perfect example on how fast things can change when awareness slips, even if it's for a moment. I'll tell you about that case. But first, let's take a closer look at what Grand Central really represents and why it draws so many people in every hour of every day. When you step into Grand Central Station, it's easy to get caught up in the wonder of it all. The first thing that hits you is the light that filters through those arch windows, catching the marble and turning everything gold. Then there's the sound of the steady movement, conversations blending with the rolling suitcases, the rush of trains pulling in and out below. You stand in that main concourse, and for a moment, you feel small in the best possible way. That's the beauty that Grand Central makes you realize you're part of something bigger, something constantly in motion. But if you've ever studied human behavior, you know that the same environment that inspires wonder can hide danger. A crowd is one of the hardest things to read because movement can become noise. You lose track of body language. You lose sight of intent. You stop noticing who's paying attention to you and who isn't. From a situational standpoint, Grand Central is a masterclass in controlled chaos. Every day, about 750,000 people move through this terminal. That is commuters from the suburbs, tourists with cameras, construction workers, executives, street performers, food vendors, and officers on patrol. The flow is constant, up escalators, down hallways, through turnstiles, into restaurants, retail spaces. It is a living organism, one that never fully rests. And when something goes wrong here, it's not just about the crime, it's about the ripple effect it sends to all those lives that are passing through. When I teach awareness, I teach about baselines, what's normal for an environment. In Grand Central, the baseline is movement, noise, motion, conversation. But the trick is to recognize disruption that breaks that rhythm. Something or someone standing in a place where everyone's walking. It could be someone watching rather than moving. attention in a group that wasn't there a moment ago. These are the cues most people overlook, and they're the ones that often precede violence. The architecture itself adds another layer. You got multiple levels, the upper concourse, the dining concourse below, tunnels that branch out like arteries, each with their own personality. Upper level feels open, bright, almost majestic. Lower level, where the dining area sits, has a different vibe, a different feel. Lower ceilings, tighter spaces, more corners, and shadows. It's easier to disappear down there. And for anyone who understands crime patterns, you know that's the kind of environment that can shift from safe to dangerous in seconds. Grand Central's history is as much about people as it is about trains. It's been a meeting point for soldiers returning from war, for lovers saying goodbye, for business deals and chance encounters. It's appeared in more films, books, and photographs than probably any other building in America. But what most visitors never think about is the security aspect, how difficult it is to protect this space that is both public and private, constantly crowded and constantly moving. The NYPD has a strong presence here, as do MTA police, but no amount of uniform patrol can see everything, everywhere, all at once. That's the nature of New York City crime. It doesn't always happen in dark alleys. It happens in bright, open spaces, sometimes within eyesight of a crowd. Sometimes crime is not only about opportunity alone, it can be fueled by impulse, anger, and that is what made this next story so tragic. Because in this case, two teenagers, barely more than kids, were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The dining concourse beneath Grand Central is a popular spot. It has everything from fast food to bakeries to sit-down spots, and it's always busy, especially around lunch and early evening. You'll see families, commuters grabbing a quick meal, tourists resting after walking half the city. That's where these two teens were eating, laughing, enjoying their visit to New York. They were from overseas, visiting one of the world's most famous cities, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Moments before the attack, nothing seemed unusual. People were lined up for food. Noise level was typical. Security cameras later showed how quickly this incident escalated. Confrontation that was brief, then all of a sudden it turned violent. A knife appeared and panic followed. Within seconds, one teen was down and the other was injured, and the attacker fled into the crowd. Imagine the hundreds of people seeing this crime, and most of them didn't really see what happened, even though they were looking, and that's the deceptive nature of crowd dynamics. Sound gets swallowed, attention is scattered, and even witnesses, they're not sure what they saw. It's chaos wrapped in confusion. I remember watching that footage later, and what struck me most wasn't just the violence, it's how fast awareness can evaporate. People looked, then froze. Others moved away instinctively, unsure what to do. And while trained responders rushed in, for those few moments, it was pure panic for those people. The kind of panic that reminds us how vulnerable even a city as tough as New York can be. As investigators would later learn, the attacker was a local young man with a violent past. The victims were completely innocent. Visitors who never expected their trip to New York to turn into tragedy. And for all the beauty and history of Grand Central that it represents, that day became a crime scene. A reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. It arrives suddenly, without warning, in the very places you feel safest. In the hours that followed, Grand Central changed. The sound of trains was replaced by sirens. NYPD officers flooded the concourse. MTA police locked down the exits. For a few moments, the beating heart of New York City, Grand Central, paused. That's what major incidents do. They interrupt the rhythm of a city that never sleeps. When word got out that the victims were teenagers visiting from another country, the story hit harder. These weren't gang members, criminals. These were just kids, tourists, who wanted to experience New York City that millions dream of seeing. Their trip was supposed to be about exploration and adventure. Instead, it ended in blood in one of New York City's most iconic landmarks. The attacker didn't get far. Security cameras captured his movements, running through tunnels, pushing through the crowds, even jumping turnstiles in a desperate attempt to get away. But New York is a city covered in eyes. Between surveillance and witnesses and technology, the city's web of observation is tight. Within hours, investigators had identified and tracked this man down. The arrest happened not far from the incident. What came out afterward was both predictable and frustrating. The suspect had prior arrests. He'd been released before. There were signs, incidents that should have raised red flags, but of course it didn't. And that's something I talk about often. How the cracks in the system allow small acts of violence to grow into tragedy. Prevention doesn't just start when a knife is pulled. It starts long before, when behavior is noticed, documented, and addressed. But too often, those early warning signs get ignored or dismissed. In the days that followed, the news ran the story relentlessly. Headlines called it a shocking act of violence in the heart of New York City. Social media debated what it said about public safety, about crime in the city, on how safe tourists really are. Some blamed the system, others blamed society, the government, politicians. What I see in all these cases is simple truth. Awareness is your first line of defense. You can't predict everything, but you can recognize what doesn't fit. I've always been aware of crime and how it moves, how it hides, how it strikes. That's not new for me. Decades in law enforcement and security will do that to you. So when I walk through places like Grand Central, I'm not seeing it differently now. I see it the same way I've always had. The difference is most people don't. That's the moral of this story. Awareness isn't something you switch on after a tragedy. It's something you live by every day. It's a mindset, a habit, and a responsibility. Because here's the thing, New York City is still one of the greatest cities in the world. It's alive, complex, filled with energy and resilience. Millions pass through places like Grand Central every year without incident. But for that one moment, for those two teenagers and their family, the world stopped. And it reminds us that even the safest environment carry risk if we let our guard down. After the case was closed, I remember reading a quote from one of the victim's parents. They said their child loved New York. Despite everything that happened, they refused to let that love turn to hate. That's a statement that should stay with you, as it does with me. That statement breaks your heart, but makes you believe again. It's a city that demands your respect. And respect in this sense means understanding that safety isn't a guarantee, it's a practice. In training, I always say this: awareness isn't about fear, it's about readiness. It's about understanding human behavior and recognizing what doesn't belong. Whether you're a cop, a commuter, or a tourist, the principles are the same. Know your baseline, read the room, watch for disruptions, trust your intuition, and most importantly, don't assume someone else is paying attention, because when everyone assumes that, no one is. That day in Grand Central was a tragedy, yes, but it's also a lesson about how fast situations can evolve, how emotions can ignite violence, and how critical it is to remain tuned in to your surroundings. It's the kind of case I often reference, not to sensationalize it, but to remind people that true crime isn't just about the crime itself. It's about understanding why it happens and how to prevent it. When I finished my training session near Grand Central this week, I took a few minutes to walk the concourse before heading out. I stood under that massive celestial ceiling, looking at the constellations painted high above, and I thought about those kids. I thought about the families that lost so much in a matter of seconds. And I thought about how, despite everything, life in the city moves on. Trains keep running, people keep rushing. Somewhere in that movement, there's a silent reminder that awareness matters. Every moment matters. Because in a city built on motion, the most dangerous thing any of us can do is stop paying attention.